6 weeks before I was supposed to marry Claire, she told me something that should have made me trust her more. Her parents would not be at our wedding. She said they were toxic, that she had cut them out years ago, and that I needed to accept it. I did. I loved her. Then one Saturday morning, I secretly drove to the address I found through a public record. I expected an intimidating mansion and two wealthy people who had rejected their daughter. Instead, I found a modest house, an older man watering flowers, and a woman holding a birthday card that had been returned unopened. They weren't dead. They weren't dangerous. They were heartbroken. And while I was sitting in their kitchen, Claire texted me saying, "Good news. My parents finally apologized and want to meet you for lunch." I stared at that message, then looked across the table at the two people she claimed had disappeared from her life. That's when I realized I wasn't about to meet my fiancé's parents. I was about to discover a lie big enough to destroy a wedding. But I didn't confront her. Instead, I quietly invited the people she had erased to our engagement dinner. And when the door opened that night, the look on Claire's face told me everything. My name is Daniel Mercer. Daniel to everyone who actually knows me. I run a commercial real estate firm out of Greater Boston. We're based in Wellesley, Massachusetts, right in the heart of Norfolk County. My family has done well. My father, Michael, built the business from nothing in the 80s. I came in at 26, and we scaled it together, and now it's the kind of operation that makes my grandfather, God rest him, look down from wherever he is and feel satisfied. But money was never the point in our house. Family was the point. Always family. We're Italian-American, 3 generations deep in Greater Boston. My parents live in Brookline in the same house they bought when they got married. Sunday dinners are mandatory, non-negotiable, and treated with the same seriousness as a board meeting. My mother, Teresa, makes baked spinach pie from scratch every single week. Has done it since before I was born. And if you don't eat at least 2 pieces, she takes it personally. My Uncle Frank lives 12 minutes away and has never once in his life needed an invitation to show up at our door. We are loud, we are close, and we do not do things halfway. So when I tell you I met Claire at a fundraiser in Birmingham, and within 4 months I was completely gone over this woman, understand what that means coming from me. I don't fall fast. I don't fall easy. I had dated seriously twice before, and both times ended the same way. Not dramatically, just quietly. The way things end when two people realize they want different lives. Claire felt different from the first night. She walked into that fundraiser in a black dress that probably cost more than my first car. Laughed at my Uncle Frank's terrible joke about Italian yogurt within 5 minutes of meeting him, and then turned to my mother and asked, genuinely asked, not politely asked, about the recipe for the appetizer she'd just eaten. My mother grabbed her arm and talked to her for 45 minutes. I stood there watching it happen and thought, oh, so this is how it happens. We dated for 16 months. She met my family early. By month 3, she was at Sunday dinner. By month 5, she knew which chair was Uncle Frank's and never sat in it. My family absorbed her the way Italian-American families absorb people they like completely immediately and with a lot of food involved. I proposed on the rooftop of the Boston Harbor Hotel in downtown Boston on a Thursday evening in early summer. Ring, flowers, the whole thing. She said yes before I finished asking. My mother cried when I called her. My father said, good. Now bring her to every Sunday dinner so your mother can feed her properly. Uncle Frank somehow already knew. To this day, I don't know how I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And I had absolutely no idea what she was planning. Before we get to the part that changed everything, tell me one thing. Would you have trusted Claire's explanation, or would you have investigated too? Keep that answer in mind as the story unfolds. Here's the thing about Claire that I want you to understand before anything else. She wasn't cold. She wasn't distant. She was warm and funny. And she made me feel consistently like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. So, when the topic of her family came up, and it came up early, because in my world, family comes up immediately, her answer didn't feel like a red flag. It felt like a wound. My parents and I don't have a relationship. She told me one night about 7 weeks in. We were sitting on the couch in her apartment in Midtown. Takeout containers on the coffee table, some show on in the background. Neither of us were watching. They were really toxic when I was growing up. Controlling, critical, my dad especially. I had to put serious distance between us just to function as an adult. I even changed my last name on social media to get some breathing room. I looked at her. She wasn't performing it. Her eyes were steady and a little tired, like someone recounting something they'd processed a long time ago. But that still cost something to say out loud. "I'm sorry," I said. "Because what else do you say?" "It's okay. It's just not something I talk about a lot." "They won't be at the wedding. I need you to be okay with that." I told her I was okay with that, and I was because I trusted her. Because she had given me zero reason not to. What I didn't fully account for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Claire. They weren't, not even close. But the Mercer family operates on a specific cultural frequency. And that frequency includes a bone-deep need to know the people connected to the people they love. It's not nosiness. It's not judgment. It's just we believe you understand a person better when you understand where they came from, who raised them, what table they grew up sitting at. And by month 12 of our engagement, the silence around Claire's family had started creating its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in early October. My mother had made baked ziti, the real version, the one that takes most of Saturday to prepare. And we were all around the table in Grosse Pointe. Me, Claire, my parents, Uncle Frank, my cousin Jason, and his wife. Everything was warm and normal until Uncle Frank, operating as he always does with complete disregard for social timing, put down his fork and looked at Claire. "Claire, sweetheart, I got to ask you something." She smiled. "Sure, Frank. Where are your people?" The table went quiet the way tables go quiet when someone says the thing everyone has been carefully not saying. Claire's smile stayed in place, but her eyes shifted just slightly. "My parents and I aren't in contact." "I've mentioned that." "I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it." Frank wasn't being cruel. He was being frank. Because in our family, and I mean this with love, you don't marry into a family you've never met. It's not how we do things. "Frank," my father's voice, low single word. Frank picked up his fork. But the question was already on the table, and no amount of baked ziti was going to bury it. Later, after Claire had gone home, my father came and found me in the kitchen. He poured himself a small glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "She's a good woman," he said. "Not a question. She is. I believe you." He nodded slowly. "But Daniel, we're going to stand in a church. We're going to make promises in front of God and everyone we know. And we're going to do that without knowing a single person from her side. Her parents are toxic pop. She had a heart, I hear you. I believe her." He set the glass down. "But toxic people still exist somewhere. They have an address." He looked at me steadily. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into." I didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder once and went back to the dining room. I stood there in my parents' kitchen for a long time after that. But here's what I need you to understand. I still wasn't suspicious. Not really. Not of Claire. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the one thought I couldn't shake, the one that kept surfacing on the drive home to Midtown was this. What if her parents take one look at me and decide I'm not what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds coming from a guy with a successful business and a family like mine. But Claire existed in a very specific world. Corporate marketing, downtown Boston, the kind of social circle where everyone has an MBA and an opinion about wine regions. Her apartment was decorated like a magazine. Her friends were brands I had to look up. She carried herself with a particular kind of polish that I found attractive, but also occasionally, quietly, made me feel like I was slightly too much, too loud, too Italian, too Frank adjacent. What if her parents were the same way? What if they had money, standards, expectations I didn't know about? What if they met me and Claire saw the whole thing through their eyes and something shifted? That was my actual fear. Driving north on Route 2 the following Sunday morning in October. Not that I'd uncover a lie. Not that anything was wrong. I thought I was going to meet intimidating people who might not think I was good enough. I was going to introduce myself, take whatever they gave me, and try to make a case for myself as the man their daughter had chosen. I genuinely thought I was the underdog in the story. Finding her parents hadn't actually required a private investigator, just a routine piece of administrative boredom. By month 12 of our engagement, Claire had moved into a high-rise condo downtown that my firm owns and manages. Because we were getting married in a few weeks, our legal team needed her to formally sign onto the master corporate lease for tax purposes. I was at my desk on a Thursday afternoon when my office manager dropped the processed paperwork on my desk. I glanced down at the state-issued ID she had uploaded to the portal. Claire Melissa Holloway, not Ashford, the name she used on social media and introduced to my friends Holloway. Out of pure idle curiosity, I ran a quick property search on the name. A few clicks led to an old public record, a dormant Facebook profile she hadn't touched since college, and a primary address on Elm Street in Concord, Michigan. About an hour and 25 minutes north on Route 2, I told Claire I had a property walk through. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The drive up was mostly me rehearsing introductions in my head and quietly dreading the moment someone opened the door and looked at me like I wasn't what they had in mind. I got off the highway into Concord just before 10 o'clock in the morning. Followed the GPS into a neighborhood of modest ranch homes, clean streets, American flags, the kind of block where people know their neighbors' names and wave from the driveway. I slowed down. Wait, I found the house. A well-kept ranch home with a flower bed along the front walk and wind chimes on the porch. And in the front yard, moving slowly with a garden hose, was an older man in a Boston Tigers t-shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering the flower bed with the unhurried patience of someone who had nowhere more important to be. This is not what I pictured. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, recalibrating everything. There was no gate, no luxury car in the driveway. No indication whatsoever that the people inside this house had ever spent a single moment worrying about whether someone else was good enough for anything. These are not intimidating people. These are regular people. And for one brief, uncomplicated moment, I felt genuinely relieved. I got out of the car, walked up the driveway. He noticed me when I was about 12 feet away and squinted in that cautious way people do when a stranger walks toward them. Help you with something? I stopped, took a breath. Sir, you don't know me. My name is Nikiko Mercer. I'm engaged to your daughter, Claire. Richard Holloway dropped the hose, not fumbled it, dropped it. Water pulled slowly across the driveway as he stared at me, and his face did something I was completely unprepared for. It crumbled. Not with anger, not with suspicion, with relief. With 3 years of accumulated grief, finding somewhere to finally land. Elaine, his voice broke on her name. Elaine, come outside. And in that single moment, standing on a driveway in Concord, watching a retired postal worker try to collect himself, my entire understanding of the situation turned completely upside down. Inside the Holloway house, everything I thought I knew about Claire began coming apart at the seams. Quietly, methodically, over coffee I didn't ask for, and a plate of cookies Elaine put out with shaking hands. The house was clean and modest, and completely filled with Claire. School photos, birthday pictures, a prom photo on the mantle, a college graduation portrait where Richard and Elaine stood on either side of her beaming. Richard's arm around her shoulders. NY's face so proud it almost hurt to look at. These were not the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. The story came out carefully. Richard was a retired postal worker, 34 years. Elaine had been a school secretary in the Concord district for most of Claire's childhood. They had put her through the Boston University. Full ride, no parent debt. They were proud of that, deeply proud. When Claire moved to Boston and started building her corporate life, things changed slowly. Calls got shorter. Visits stopped. She started appearing in photos online under a different last name, Ashford, her middle name, at events with people Richard and Elaine didn't recognize, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the wedding conversation, the $120,000 ask. Richard's heartbroken counter offer of $15,000. Everything they could give without destroying their retirement. Claire's response, if you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it. Blocked that same night. Elaine slid something across the table. A birthday card sealed, unopened, stamped, returned to sender in red. Claire's handwriting on the return address label, our address. I stared at the red stamp on the envelope, then slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the text message Claire had sent me late the previous evening, the one I had read right before falling asleep, the one that had prompted me to make this drive in the first place. Babe, great news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything, and they want to meet you for lunch tomorrow before they head out on a trip. I'm so excited for you to finally meet them. The kitchen was very quiet. I looked up slowly. Richard and Elaine Holloway were sitting directly across from me, completely oblivious to the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Elaine read it. She set the phone down gently, said nothing. Richard looked out the kitchen window at the flower bed he'd been watering when I walked up. I thought about the drive up, my rehearsed introductions, my quiet fear that I wouldn't be good enough for these people. I almost laughed. I almost actually laughed because I had spent weeks worrying that Claire's parents might look down on me, that they might be too polished, too wealthy, too particular. And they were here in Concord in a ranch house on Elm Street, with wind chimes and a garden hose and 3 years of unopened birthday cards. The person who had decided someone wasn't good enough wasn't them. It was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who drove up route too nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man who drove back to Boston that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is that the great one never breaks character. Not even at the dinner table, not even when everything is falling apart. I didn't confront her that night. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I pulled back into our parking garage in Midtown Boston at a little past 2 in the afternoon, sat in my car for 10 full minutes, and made a very deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was afraid. Not because I doubted what I'd just seen and heard in that kitchen in Concord, but because I am my father's son, and my father taught me something about the moment right before a confrontation that most people get wrong. He said, "Daniel, the man who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a confession." I rode the elevator up to our apartment floor and stood outside the door for a moment. I could hear Claire inside, moving around the low sound of a TV, completely unbothered, completely unaware. I put my key in the door, walked in. She was on the couch with a glass of white wine and her laptop opened to a venue website. She looked up and smiled the way she always smiled. Warm, easy, like I was the best part of her day. "How was the walkthrough?" "Promising," I said. "Long drive, though? You look tired. You want me to order something? I want you to explain to me why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Concordal with our return address stamped on it, and read. That's what I want." "Sure," I said. "Whatever you're in the mood for." I sat down next to her. She leaned her head briefly on my shoulder and went back to looking at venue photos. I looked at the screen without seeing any of it. On the outside, completely normal. On the inside, I was completely dismantling everything. That night, I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through a complicated deal. I separated what I knew from what I assumed, and I built a timeline. What I knew: Claire's real last name was Holloway. Her parents were Richard and Elaine Holloway of Concord, Michigan. Alive, present, and heartbroken. They had not abused her. They had not been controlling or toxic in any way that Richard, Elaine, or a single photograph in that house suggested. They had offered her $18,000 toward a wedding, been told that wasn't enough, and been erased the same night. What I knew: Claire had sent me a text while I was sitting in her parents' kitchen telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch, which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie, which meant there was a next floor, which meant there was someone she planned to bring to that lunch. Who? That was the question I fell asleep trying to answer. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next 3 days, I paid attention differently. Not suspiciously. I was careful about that. I didn't go through her phone. I didn't follow her. I just listened. The way you listen when you finally understand that every conversation has been happening on 2 levels simultaneously, and you've only been hearing one of them. I noticed that she mentioned her boss, a man named David Whitmore, more than she ever had before. Casually, Robert thinks the Henderson account is going to close early or in passing. Marianne Whitmore was at that same fundraiser, apparently. Small mentions, nothing alarming. The kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they're trying to make someone feel familiar with a name before that name becomes important. She was warming me up to them. She'd been doing it for weeks, and I'd never noticed. David Whitmore. I looked him up from my office the following Tuesday morning with the door closed. Senior Vice President at Claire's firm, a wealth management company headquartered in downtown Boston. His photo on the company website showed a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, the kind of effortlessly confident that comes from decades of never having to justify himself in a room. His wife, Vivian, appeared in a society column from a Boston charitable gala from 3 years prior. Polished, highlighted hair, the whole picture. A wealthy, well-regarded couple. Exactly the kind of people you'd want standing beside you if you were trying to convince a traditional Italian-American family that you came from somewhere impressive. There they are. I sat back in my chair and stared at the corporate headshot of the Callahans. I realized then that Claire wasn't just a con artist. She was trapped in a prison of her own immense insecurity. She had spent a decade reinventing herself in Boston, tailoring her identity to climb a social ladder that my family didn't care about, but her corporate friends did. When her father refused to destroy his retirement for a single day of theater, it wasn't just a financial disagreement to her. In her mind, their modesty was a threat to the polished, wealthy illusion she had sacrificed everything to build. To keep the lie alive, she didn't just walk away from them. She had to erase them completely. And then I thought about what she must have told the Callahans to get them to agree to this, because here's what I know about people like Robert and Vivian Whitmore. They didn't get where they are by being stupid or careless. For Claire to get them to sit across a lunch table and introduce themselves as her parents, she had to have given them something that made sense. A story that held together, something sympathetic enough that two busy, prominent people would say yes without asking too many questions. What did she tell them? I turned it over for 2 days, and then on Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed with a reminder Claire had added to our shared calendar. Lunch, Robert and Vivian, the Lark, West Bloomfield. Sunday, 1 p.m. She'd added a note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, babe. This means everything to me. I stared at that note for a long time. It means everything to me. I thought about Elaine Holloway pressing a sealed birthday card across a kitchen table. I thought about Richard Holloway's face when he read that text message over my shoulder. Yeah, I'll bet it does. I called my father that same Thursday from my car, engine running, sitting in the parking structure beneath our building. He picked up on the second ring. I need to talk to you. Come to the house. 15 minutes later, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table in Brookline, the same table where Claire had charmed my mother, where Uncle Frank had asked his question, where everything had looked completely normal 2 weeks ago. And I laid it out, everything. Concord, Richard, and Elaine, the birthday card, the text, Robert, and Marianne Whitmore. My father sat across from me with his hands folded on the table and listened without a single interruption. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" For words. That's it. No lecture. No, I told you so. No dramatic reaction. I need to go to this lunch. I said, I need to build something bigger. My father nodded slowly. And the Holloway? I'm going back to Concord after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next. He looked at me steadily. And what comes next? A dinner, I said. A real one with the right people in the room. Another pause. Then my father stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, I'll talk to your mother about the restaurant. That was the whole conversation. My mother's reaction was slightly less contained. She came into the kitchen from the living room, where she'd apparently been listening to the entire thing, which in our house is not eavesdropping. It's just being present, and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that I can only describe as the specific fury of an Italian mother who has fed someone spanakopita in her home and been lied to. She sat at my table. My mother said, Ma, she ate my food, Daniel, in my house. And her mother is up in Concord with a birthday card that came back unopened. I know those poor people. I know, Ma. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she walked over and put both hands on my face. The move she's been making since I was 4 years old, and she wanted my full attention. You fixed this, she said quietly. Not just for you, for them. Sunday came. The Lark in West Bloomfield Old Money Restaurant. The kind of place where the lighting is specifically designed to make everyone look slightly more important than they are. Claire had made the reservation. Naturally, I got there 5 minutes early and took a seat facing the door. They arrived together, Claire in the middle, one hand looped through David Whitmore's arm, Vivian on his other side. Claire was glowing. Robert moved with the easy confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Vivian was all gracious smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile, firm handshake. "No," Claire said, her voice warm with a particular kind of triumph. "This is my dad, Robert, and my mom, Vivian." "Robert." "Vivian." "Not Richard." "Not Elaine." "Robert." "Vivian." I shook both hands. "I've heard so much about you, both of you." I had heard nothing about them because they did not exist in this role until approximately a week ago. We sat, menus opened, and for the next 15 minutes, I watched Claire perform with a fluency that under any other circumstances, I would have found genuinely impressive. She laughed at Robert's observations a half-beat too quickly. She referenced shared memories with Vivian, mentions of trips, restaurants, family moments, and Vivian tracked along carefully, the way someone does when they're working from a script they only half memorized. Robert was smoother. He asked me questions about the business, made appropriate comments about Boston's commercial real estate market, and generally acted like a man who had done his research and was determined to be convincing. They were all performing. The whole table was a stage, and I sat there eating pan-seared white fish, being absolutely perfectly charming. "So, Robert," I said, setting my fork down with the relaxed ease of a man with no concerns whatsoever. "Claire's told me a lot about you. You've clearly been a huge presence in her life." Robert smiled. "She's been like family to us." "Like family." "There it is. That means everything," I said. I looked at Claire when I said it. She beamed back at me. "Keep smiling, sweetheart. I'll be honest with you both," I continued, leaning forward slightly, the way I do in negotiations when I want someone to feel like I'm letting them in on something. "My family is traditional Italian on my father's side. We take the formal stuff seriously. My parents would never forgive me if we didn't do this properly." I paused. "We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing overwhelming. Family, a good meal, a toast. My parents just need to welcome the people who matter to Claire before we get to the altar." Robert glanced at Vivian. A half-second of silent calculation. "Then we'd be honored." Claire grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. "Perfect," I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back, the full, radiant, triumphant smile of a woman who believes she is just one. The trap was already built. She just walked into it smiling. If you were in Daniel's position at this point, would you confront Claire immediately or wait for the full truth? Drop your answer in the comments. Then stay with me for what happened next. The following 6 days, I moved quietly and precisely. Monday, I went back to Concord. I called Richard from the driveway before I knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking. We sat in the same kitchen, same coffee, same table. I told them about the lunch, Robert and Vivian Whitmore, the performance, the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. NY's hands went still around her mug. "Daniel, we don't want to make a scene." "Elaine." I looked at her directly. "My mother is going to stand at a church and welcome whoever walks through those doors into our family. She deserves to know who that actually is." I paused. "And you have spent 3 years sending birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room. Not for drama, just because you're her parents and somebody needs to say that out loud." Richard reached over and covered NY's hand with his. He looked at me. "What time should we be there?" "Tuesday." I sat with my father and Uncle Frank in my father's home office in Brookline and briefed them fully. My father listened, asked 2 precise questions, and then said, "I'll handle the restaurant." He picked up his phone, and that was that. Uncle Frank's response required immediate containment. "I want to say something to her at the door," he grumbled, narrowing his eyes. "No, Frank, you say absolutely nothing," I told him, putting both hands on his shoulders. "I need you to do something that is going to be the hardest thing you have ever done. Not one word until I stand up to make the toast." He looked at the ceiling, then at my father, chewing on the inside of his cheek. "Fine," Frank finally hissed. "But I want a double portion of cannoli before anyone else sits down, and I'm holding the door when we walk out." I looked at him and nodded. "That I can absolutely get you." Every piece was in place. The Olive Room in downtown Boston. My father's choice and the right one. A restaurant that felt like someone's home, not a stage set. The private dining room in the back. White linen, candles, warm lighting. My mother had handled the menu personally and added a small framed photo of my grandparents to the welcome table because she said they should be there. Richard and Elaine Holloway were driving down from Concord Sunday morning, checking into a hotel in Dearborn. Richard had called me Wednesday night to confirm. His voice was steady, careful, and at the end of the call, after we'd gone over the details, he said quietly, "Daniel, whatever happens in that room tomorrow, thank you for going to Concord. For knocking on that door." A pause. She picked a good one, even if she doesn't know it yet. I didn't know what to say to that. So, I just said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Richard." I pressed my suit Saturday night. Got into bed next to Claire, who was already asleep, already dreaming about whatever version of tomorrow she had constructed in her head. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about a man in a Boston Tigers t-shirt watering a flower bed on Elm Street. A sealed birthday card with a red stamp across the front. A kitchen table where two people had been quietly waiting for 3 years for someone to finally show up. Someone had shown up tomorrow. So would they. You can build a lie as tall as you want, but the moment the right people walk through the door, the whole thing comes down. I woke up that Sunday morning in October with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, it comes from certainty. I lay there for a few minutes listening to Claire in the bathroom, the sound of the shower, the hair dryer, the particular rhythm of a woman preparing for a performance she believes she has already won. And I thought about Richard Holloway pressing his navy blazer in a Dearborn hotel room. Elaine standing at a mirror trying to hold herself together. Two people who drove an hour and 25 minutes down Route 2 for a dinner. Their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited to. "Get up, Daniel. Let's go finish this." Claire spent 2 hours getting ready. 2 hours. I sat in the living room watching football highlights with the volume low, and I let her have every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion. Once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I said she looked beautiful because she did. That was never the issue. The issue was everything underneath the beautiful. She wanted to leave early to check on the setup. I told her to go ahead, that I had a quick call to make, and I'd meet her there. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door, looking like everything in her life was exactly on track. The moment the door closed, I picked up my phone and called Richard. He answered on the first ring. "You good?" I asked. "We're ready." His voice was quiet, solid, the voice of a man who had decided something. NY's dressed. We're ready." "Okay. When I text you, you walk in. Doesn't matter what's happening at the table. You just walk in and you stand there. You don't have to say a word." A pause. "Richard." "Yeah. She's going to see you the second that door opens." "I know. I just want you prepared for Daniel." His voice stopped me. "I've been prepared for 3 years. I've been prepared since the night she blocked us. I've been prepared every time NY's birthday rolled around, and we didn't get a call." Another pause. "Shorter. We'll be there." I held the phone for a second after he hung up. Then I put on my jacket, checked my inside pocket for the ring, and walked out. The Olive Room on a Sunday evening is exactly what it should be. Warm, full, the smell of lemon and garlic meeting you at the door like an old friend. But the private dining room in the back operates on a different frequency. Quieter, intentional, white linen, low lighting, round tables arranged so that everyone can see everyone else. My mother had been there since 3:45 in the afternoon. When I walked in at 6:15, she was adjusting the centerpiece flowers with the focused energy of a woman who understood that the details of a room tell people how seriously you take them. She looked up when I came in and studied my face the way she's been studying my face since I was old enough to have something to hide. "You okay?" "Yeah, Ma." "You sure?" "I'm sure." She crossed the room and put both hands on my face. Looked at me for a long moment. "Your grandfather," she said quietly, "used to say that the truth always finds the biggest chair in the room, even when nobody invites it." She smoothed my collar. "Let it sit down tonight." I nearly lost it right there. Nearly. My father was near the bar talking with Jason already in his good charcoal suit. Completely composed. He looked at me when I walked over. One slow nod. That nod said, "Everything is in place. The room is set. Do what you need to do." Uncle Frank was at a side table with a full plate of cannoli and the concentrated expression of a man fulfilling a solemn obligation. He looked up at me, pointed at the plate, then pointed at me. His version of, I held up my end of the deal. "Don't you forget yours." I almost smiled. They arrived at 6:45. I heard Claire's laugh in the hallway before the door opened. That specific social laugh, half a note higher than her real one. The laugh she uses when she wants a room to feel like a party before she's even entered it. She came in first. Navy dress, hair perfect, every detail exactly right. David Whitmore followed. Silver-haired, expensive suit, moving with the easy authority of a man who has never once doubted his right to be wherever he is. Vivian beside him, gracious and polished, pearls at her collarbone. Claire moved through that room like she owned it. She kissed my mother on both cheeks. She shook my father's hand with both of hers. She laughed at something Vivian said near the drinks table and touched her arm warmly. She was magnificent. Genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. She slipped her arm through mine when she reached me and leaned up close. "This is perfect," she whispered. "Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted." "I know," I said. "That's why I did it." She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat. The food came out. Grilled branzino, lamb chops, a spread my mother had personally designed. Fresh pa that arrived in a basket wrapped in cloth. The table filled with the warm noise of a real family dinner. David Whitmore was smooth and engaged, asking my father about the business with what appeared to be genuine interest. Vivian complimented my mother on the restaurant choice, and my mother received the compliment graciously while privately thinking thoughts I will never fully know. Claire was glowing, relaxed, victorious. I ate. I laughed at the right moments. I refilled glasses and asked questions and was by every visible measure a completely relaxed man enjoying a family dinner. My phone was face down in my jacket pocket. I had one text to send. I was waiting for the exact right moment. That moment came at 7:56 in the small lull between the main course and whatever was supposed to come next. The table was warm, the wine was flowing, and Claire was mid-laugh at something Robert had said. I slipped my phone out, typed one word to Richard. "Now." Then I stood up, the tap of a knife against a glass, that clean, clear sound that tells a room, "Stop. Listen." The table settled. Claire looked up at me with that full, radiant smile. The smile of a woman who thinks the next 60 seconds are going to be a toast about how much he loves her. I let the silence hold for just a beat longer than comfortable. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight." My voice was calm, measured. The way my father talks when something actually matters in our family. A dinner like this isn't just a nice evening. It's a declaration. It's us saying, these people are real. These people matter. We don't do that lightly. I looked around the table slowly. My father taught me that the people you bring to the table tell everyone exactly who you are. I paused. "So, I want to make sure tonight we have the right people at this table." I looked at Tony, the restaurant manager, standing near the back wall. He'd been briefed. He knew his cue. He walked to the side door and pushed it open. And in walked Richard and Elaine Holloway. Richard in his navy blazer, the one that didn't quite fit the way it used to. The one you could tell he'd had for years and saved for occasions that mattered. Elaine in a burgundy dress, small purse clutched in both hands, chin up, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who had decided she was not going to fall apart in public no matter what happened next. They walked through that door and into the silence of that room, and Claire saw them. I was watching her face. I had positioned myself specifically to watch her face. The color left it like a tide going out, fast, complete, and absolute. Her lips parted. Her hand, the one holding her wine glass, went completely still. The glass tilted. I reached over without looking at her and steadied it. Set it down gently on the linen. She turned to me. Her eyes were doing the rapid calculation of someone trying to find the story that saves them. I could see it happening in real time. The search for the exit, the angle, the version of this that she could still control. "Daniel." Her voice came out thin, barely a voice at all. "I went to Concord," I said quietly, not loudly. I wasn't performing for the room. I was talking to her 4 weeks ago. I drove up Route 2 on a Sunday morning because I told myself, maybe I can fix this for her. Maybe I can give her her family back as a wedding gift. I let that land. I found a man watering his flower bed on Elm Street in a Boston Tigers t-shirt. I told him my name, and he dropped the garden hose. The room was a held breath. Your father worked for the Postal Service for 34 years, Claire. Your mother was a school secretary for most of your childhood. They put you through the Boston University, and they did it without a single dollar of debt because they wanted you to have everything. My voice stayed level even. They offered you $18,000 money from their retirement, and you told them that if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't exist. Her mouth opened. You don't understand the hole I sat in their kitchen. I said it quietly like a door closing. I saw your school photos on the refrigerator. I held the birthday card you mailed back to our address without opening it. I paused, and while I was sitting there, you texted me, told me your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Robert and Marianne Whitmore. Vivian had both hands pressed flat on the table in front of her, her face completely pale. Robert had gone absolutely still. Robert, Vivian, I said, my voice shifting to something quiet and respectful. I know exactly what she told you. She told you that my family was deeply judgmental, that her real parents had passed away years ago, and she asked you to step in as her honorary family mentors so she wouldn't have to face a traditional Italian wedding alone. She weaponized your kindness and your status to fill 2 empty chairs on a stage. I gestured toward Richard and Elaine Holloway standing near the doorway, but those are her real parents right there. Vivian looked at Claire, a long, slow look, the kind that doesn't need words because the words would be insufficient anyway. Then she looked at Richard and Elaine, and something moved across her face that was far worse than anger. It was recognition, the specific recognition of a woman who has just understood that the person she thought she knew does not exist. Robert said nothing. He folded his napkin, placed it on the table, the gesture of a man who is leaving and has decided there is nothing worth saying first. I turned back to Claire one final time. She had stopped looking for the exit. There wasn't one, and she knew it. She was just looking at me, eyes bright, jaw tight. The full architecture of everything she'd built reflected back at her from every face in that room. I grew up watching my father treat people, all people, like they mattered. The guy who parks the car, the woman who cleans the office, the retired postal worker in Concordal who gives everything he has and gets told it's not enough. I reached into my jacket pocket. That's the measure I was raised with. Not the address, not the job title, not the clothes. I looked at her. By that measure, I don't know who you are. I took the ring out of my pocket. I set it on the white linen tablecloth in front of her. Not thrown, not dramatic, just placed. Quietly. The way you set something down when you've been carrying it too long and you're finally ready to put it down for good. Then I picked up the floral centerpiece from the middle of our table. White flowers. Simple. My mother's choice. And I walked across the room to where Elaine Holloway was standing. She was fighting it. You could see the effort in her jaw, her shoulders, the way she was breathing. Short and careful. The way people breathe when they are holding something enormous and cannot afford to drop it in public. I held the flowers out to her. She looked at them, looked at me, and then Elaine Holloway, who had driven an hour and 25 minutes from Concord, and pressed her best dress and held her chin up through the hardest walk of her life. She took the flowers and came completely apart. Not loudly, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from 3 years of accumulated grief, finding somewhere to finally go. Richard had his arm around her before the first sound left her. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet, his chin steady. He pulled her in and looked at me over the top of her head. And then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped forward. One step. Elaine still tucked under his arm, and he extended his free hand to me. I shook it. He gripped it hard. The grip of a man saying something his voice couldn't quite carry yet. I held it for a moment. Then I stepped back. My father was beside me. I don't know exactly when he moved. Stavros Papa Mercer materializes when it matters. It's just what he does. He looked at Richard Holloway for a moment. Then he stepped forward and extended his hand. I'm Michael, he said. I should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry for that. Richard shook his hand, swallowed once. Richard, a breath. Thank you for raising a man like that. My father looked at me sideways. Just for a second, just long enough. In 38 years, that is the proudest I have ever seen him look. My mother didn't shake NY's hand. She pulled her into a full embrace. Both arms immediate, unconditional, the way Italian mothers hold people who need to be held. Elaine held on. The flowers were still in her hands. We walked out together, the Papa Demetrius and the Holloways. My mother's arm linked through Elaine's. My father and Richard walking side by side with the quiet ease of two men who had just recognized something in each other. Jason holding doors. Uncle Frank bringing up the rear. Frank stopped at the main door. He turned back just once. I looked back, too. Claire was sitting at the center of that table in her perfect dress, in her perfectly constructed life, the ring on the linen in front of her, the centerpiece gone. Robert and Marianne Whitmore stood at the far end of the room. Vivian with her coat already on, Robert with his hand at the small of her back, neither of them looking in Claire's direction as they moved toward the exit. Her friends, the high society crowd she had curated and performed for and built her entire second identity around, sat in their chairs with the particular discomfort of people who have just witnessed something they cannot unknow and aren't sure what to do with their hands. Nobody went to her. Nobody pulled her aside. Nobody offered a version of events that made it better. Nobody played the part she needed them to play because there were no more parts available. The whole cast had walked out. She just sat there, seemed completely, finally, irreversibly seen. Uncle Frank looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head once, slow, almost sad, and let the door close behind him. Outside on the sidewalk, October air, cool and clean. Downtown Boston moving around us like it had no idea what had just happened inside that restaurant. I stood next to my father and breathed. He put his hand on the back of my neck, the thing he's done since I was a kid. Didn't say anything for a moment. Then your grandfather would have done the same thing. That was it. That was all he said. Across the sidewalk, Richard Holloway was looking up at the Boston skyline with Minnie tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands. Both of them breathing the same cool October air like people who had just been handed something back that they'd given up on ever seeing again. Richard caught me looking. He nodded once, not a thank you nod, something that didn't have a word for it. I nodded back. Some deals you close for profit. Some you close because there is no version of yourself you can live with that walks away from the table. That night, I closed the most important deal of my life. And I didn't make a single dollar. Some women lie to erase people who loved her. She built a whole life on top of that eraser. And on a Saturday night in October in a private dining room at the Olive Room in downtown Boston, every single floor of it came down. If this story kept you hooked, leave a like, subscribe for more family betrayal and revenge stories, and tell me in the comments whether Daniel made the right choice. And remember, sometimes the quietest decision at the table can be the one that changes every life around it.